Guest speaker this evening is Gavin Humphries. He is a producer and produced the film The Curse that we saw just before. Having graduated from NFTS in 2006, he went on to set up a production company called Quark Films, and since then has produced documentaries, short films, mini-series, all sorts. So he'll be here tonight to tell us a bit about what he does. So Gavin, welcome. So, we just watched The Curse, BAFTA nominated and won the award at Cannes. Tell us a bit about it.
So The Curse is a short film that I made for Film 4 in the BFI. I produced it. The director, Faisal Boulafa, we worked together on a couple of shorts previously, and Film 4 are very much talent focused, so they every year look for a few writers, directors, actors to work with on short films who are intending to make a feature film, have a long-term career plan. So they asked us to make this film. Faisal had the script for it, so we shot it quite quickly, actually. We shot it in January last year, so we completed it in May last year, just like 3 days before it was screened at Cannes. It was selected on a cut, because they look at edit cuts rather than just completed films to select films for various sections in Cannes. So yeah, it took us about 4 months to make, so the prep shoot, sorry, that's a lie. It took us about 8 months to make, but the prep to the shoot was about 4 months. But it was quite complicated to set up, because it was obviously shooting in Morocco, so that required quite a lot of time to find the locations and the casting.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I could say more.
Yeah.
I'll say more later.
Being a short independent film shot in Morocco, how hard was it to get a crew and cast together to film out over there?
It was actually the easiest shoot that I've ever had, to be honest with you. From doing lots of documentaries, so I've made documentaries for the BBC and Channel 4 and also my own independent documentaries. A lot of those, I don't know if anyone makes documentaries here at all or if you only make fiction films, but with docs you really have to go out there and just start shooting and make your films and practically make half the film before anyone wants to commission it. And a lot of those ideas that we'd worked on and films have been in different countries, in France, America, Nigeria, Italy, all over the place. So I was used to working quite nimbly and in different countries. The main thing really is it's the same principle as with any film, that everybody you work with, from the DIT through to all of your heads of department and your cast, particularly on shorts or independent films, you really want to have a great relationship with them, really trust them and know that they're invested in the project. So what we had to do first and foremost was find a partner to work with in Morocco, someone that felt they could work with us and deliver the film that we had to deliver on the production side of it. Because all the prep was in the UK, and then we had to do the locations and casting and the shoot in Morocco, then all of the post-production was in the UK again. So it took a while to find the right partner. And you have, a very restricted budget with these sorts of things, so you have to do a very precise, on the production side, a very precise budget about how you're going to split the costs between the UK and Morocco. You don't actually have enough money to pay people properly, so that's quite embarrassing if you're coming from the UK going to Morocco and asking people to work for not very much. But they invested in the idea because for them it was something quite different. It wasn't, as they said, like a French middle-class housewife's fantasy about Morocco. It was more of a sort of a different type of story for them rather than the typical kind of French and German co-productions they do. And they hadn't really worked, apart from working on gigantic films like Black Hawk Down or Prince of Persia or Gladiator, they hadn't really worked on independent British films, so it was an opportunity for them to work with, directly with British funders. And we also have a co-production treaty now with Morocco that's just been signed, so for feature films that's going on as well at a bigger level.
Is it ever an issue producing short films, because their short films are not known for having big budgets? Is it a recurring issue trying to ask people to work for very little or no money?
Well, with this, it was quite exciting because it's the biggest budget that I ever had. It was £40,000, but even then it wasn't enough to really pay people. By the time you factor in, you have to go, over there, 2 or 3 of you have to go over there several times to do the location scouting and the casting. And we shot on film in the desert, so that's not always advisable. And there was no lab there to process the stock. Although having said that, I'm being a bit churlish because shooting on digital or film stock there, it's the same. The cost is basically the same, really, unless you're going to shoot. The aesthetic of the curse demands a certain kind of production quality, so it's not a very kind of low-brow digital version. It's either the kind of Alexa type camera or a film look, and both of them are equally as expensive as the other.
As a producer, do you cringe when the director says that they want to shoot on film just because it's more expensive? Or
absolutely not, because for me, everything in filmmaking is a creative decision, and it's about what makes the best film. So if that makes the best film, then we have to make the budget work around that aesthetic. It's as simple as that, particularly for short films, because the point is they're calling cards in order to get to the next stage. And if you're not going to put all that value on screen and actually make the best film possible, then you're just going to be making another short film in order to kind of move forward. If you want to get, it's a certain type of short film or a director, producer that needs to make short films to get funding, and it's ones where you're making dramas and films that are a bit different rather than commercial genre films. So that's the way that you have to do it, unless you can just nimbly do it, a feature yourself, super kind of low budget.
So tell us a bit about how you knew the director and how you came about making this film. But did you get put together, or did you already know the director?
Well, the thing for me, so I went to the National Film and Television School, and so like you said, so Anna, who was my business partner, and myself set up the company when we finished film school to make a short film actually for Film London. And what we did is, I used to be an actor's agent before that for 5-6 years, and I really hated short films when I was an actor's agent. I couldn't stand watching them, they really annoyed me. But then I got to appreciate them when I went to film school, understand their value. So then after film school, I made a couple of very good graduation films that did very well. One was at Sundance, one got down to the last 10 for the Oscars, and I ended up going to lots of film festivals, and I learnt that going to all these film festivals and markets all over the world, you get to meet lots of people and potential collaborators. So in fact, the thing about film which is different, say, to television, is that films and relationships take a long time to, they don't boil, they simmer for a long time. So with Faisal, I met him, I was actually doing a talk at the BFI 3-4 years ago, and he was in the audience. Then we met afterwards, had some drinks, realised we had similar tastes, kept on talking. And that's been the case of most people I've worked with, that really you spend, like I was saying with finding the production company, the producer to work with in Morocco, I think you really have to find, make sure you find strong relationships, and you actually can find a true kind of collaborator to work with, someone you really understand, because it's very difficult making films to find the money when you're on set, when you're trying to deal with feedback in an edit, when no one's taking your film at film festivals. So the one thing you have to do is trust each other inside out. So it just takes a long time to find the right person to work with. I think a mistake that people often make, new and emerging filmmakers, is you're sort of so desperate to make a film that you'll sort of work with anybody and everybody, but that often leads to tears before bedtime, I think, because you don't make good films that way. It's much better to wait and find the right people to work with.
So do you often find yourselves turning away writers or directors that want to work with you, but it might not be the right project, or you might not think they're the right people?
Yeah, it's all kinds of things. I learnt it when I was an agent, and that I'd see people at drama school who were amazing in showcases and fantastically talented actors, and then we'd meet them. What you do as an agent is you go far and wide looking for people to represent, and if they're new actors, you see them in showcases or plays or whatever it is, you bring them in for an interview and find out, okay, what do you want to do with your career? Can I help you? Can I move it forward? And do I want to work with you? And 9 times out of 10, there isn't a match, because you're just different personalities, different ambitions, they're arseholes, things like that. And no matter how talented they are, you just don't need that in your life particularly. So it's the same, I think, with finding, particularly for producer, director, writers, to find people that you really enjoy. It should always be professional, but people that you enjoy spending that time with and trust each other and know each other inside out. That's a long answer to the question, sorry, but yeah.
Have you, when you were an agent, did you ever end up turning down someone that went on to do anything crazily big? Or
not that I'm aware of. There were people that I really got close to representing that it didn't happen. So we're seeing people like, James McAvoy,
right,
actors like that. So I was an agent back in 1999 to 2004. So lots of people who are quite well known now that, I saw at drama school and almost got as a client.
Yeah. So how did you get into the film side of the film industry? Did you know you wanted to be a producer, or did it just fall into it?
It was a very long process. I didn't grow up watching loads of films or liking lots of films. I worked in the theatre a bit as a teenager. I used to go to the theatre. I was a very square, weird teenager in terms of my taste. And then I just sort of fiddled around in the media for a bit. I worked at the BBC. I worked as editor of the Pink Paper for a while. And then I ended up becoming a talent agent. And it was just actually when I came to university in London, I couldn't afford to go to the theatre as much, and it was cheaper to go to the cinema, so I just kept on seeing loads of films, and I really enjoyed films, but I couldn't work out, I feel like such an old person saying, so I couldn't work out how to work in film. It felt like such a massive sort of technical operation. It felt too big and I didn't really understand it properly. But I learnt about it when I was an agent. Obviously I was reading lots of scripts. We represented quite a lot of top level talent in TV, film and theatre. I started working with American agencies and understood about the whole, reading scripts and the development side, the creative side. So I got to know how, it's the three areas. It's the creative side, it's the development, but the creative runs all the way through, right through to, the editing and the publicity marketing. It's the business side and it's the production side. So I learned a lot about the creative side and a lot about elements of the business side by being an agent, because I was negotiating contracts and all that kind of stuff. And then I went to the NFTS to learn about the production side, because I don't feel I can ever throw myself into anything without trying to understand, what does the boom operator do? What does the editor do? And learn about all of those different things more solidly. But I don't want to be a writer or a director or any of those things. I'm perfectly happy being a producer.
So why didn't you want to pursue anything in writing or directing?
I'm not interested in writing or directing.
Right.
I really like the idea of what producing is, which is a full, big job in itself, which is not just budgeting and scheduling. It's the creative side. It's working with very talented people and helping them. Like if you are a creative producer, then enabling them. Maybe you have an idea, you know the right director or writer to work with, then you develop it. So learning how to give feedback. I think also, by the way, you don't have to be a creative producer. You could be a great business producer, a great production producer. And the point is, it's such a vast job, is to understand what you're good at and what you're not good at, and don't, if you're not good at giving feedback, then don't do that, because that's really annoying to directors and everyone else, and just concentrate on the other areas. So for me, it's really interesting because it covers, so many different, the production, the creative, the marketing, publicity, the legal, all those kind of financing, relationships, networking, working with the crew, working with financiers, all that kind of stuff.
Right. So
I'm getting no credit for it, but that's fine.
So with Ravensbourne, most of the courses being 3 years, I know a lot of people are looking to maybe go on to the NFTS afterwards.
Right.
How would you rate it? Do you think doing a master's degree there is essential to pursue a serious career in the film industry, or do you have stories of people that don't necessarily need to?
Well, there's no sort of one size fits all. It's not, you can't really be prescriptive about it. Everyone has their own way of working. You might learn far more by just, first of all, there's the financial side. The NFCS do have scholarships and bursaries, and they can, support people that don't think they can afford to go there. I went there because, as I said, I wanted to kind of learn about the production side and meet people like myself who were starting out at a certain point. The intake is a little bit younger nowadays, but it used to be people that had 4 or 5 years experience, transferable skills. But for me, I wasn't the kind of person that thought, oh, I'm going to go and now try and work with this big writer and work with Danny Boyle or something like that. I was quite happy to work with talent who was starting like myself. And that's why I went there, to learn all those skills, and with people who were really talented. And the people there are incredibly talented, and it's much harder for the directors and the producers to move forward because they're harder professions. But the sound composers, the DOPs, the editors, they're all people that I trained with. They're all working on really big, films and doing incredibly well. So you work with great people there and learn a lot from them. But also, you can learn a lot on the job, but you have to decide what's right for you.
So going back to The Curse, you being nominated by BAFTA, what happened when you found out? Was there drastic changes in your profession? Were you suddenly being contacted left, right and centre, or what happens?
The one thing that I've learned here in the UK is no matter what happens, like you graduate from the NFTS with a great graduation film that gets reviewed by The Guardian, you get 3 emails or something. You win a prize at Cannes, you get a few emails and a few calls. BAFTA nomination, the same thing. You don't really... It's actually the same point as asking if you should go to the NFTS. Nothing is given to you. There's nothing, like, you make your own success ultimately. You have to make good films and work on good projects and with good people. But I think that's probably the difference between, I don't mean this in a bitter way either, but there's a difference between maybe here and, say, the United States, where here it's just another sort of notch that you have to use to get to the next stage, and you're the person that has to drive that. No one's ever going to come knocking at your door. It's different with actors, certainly, and maybe directors as well sometimes, but it's still quite tough. Opportunities can be born of these, great events. They're amazing, they're really, really good. But then you have to market yourself, pitch yourself, and know how to use that to move to the next stage. Otherwise it's kind of pretty pointless. So you need to know, you need to have a feature idea, and that's what you want to pitch to people and take that to them off the back of that success, but they won't necessarily come knocking at your door.
Yeah. So I was on your website earlier, and I saw that you made a short film called See Me with Olivia Colman in.
We made her, we made her.
She's one of the biggest names in British comedy at the moment. Would you have been able to get a name like that after you'd graduated, or did you have to persuade her with the stuff you'd done before?
With that, I'll be quite frank about it. Catherine, who's the director, Catherine Shepherd, she is a comedy actress and writer, so she just knows lots of comedy people, so we were able to leverage that relationship through Catherine.
Right.
That's how it works. Ultimately, is you're only as good as the network and the relationships that you have. So going back to what I was saying earlier on, I think the most exciting thing that I would love to be able to do all over again, and you have to work out how you can afford to do it, but is get out to as many different events as possible and just meet so many people, because this person knows that person knows this person, and it's about, it's a 2 or 3 year journey to start getting the right, cast or crew, collaborators. It's all about your own, as I said, you're only as good as the network that you have, so you just have to get out there and meet as many people as possible at every opportunity you can. So, here in London, it's London Short Film Festival, London Film Festival, the Screenwriters Festival, all that kind of stuff. You somehow have to make sure you get to those events and meet people.
And so, as a filmmaker myself, I've always wondered how, if I wanted to get a professional actor who might have a bit of a name to them, and when it comes in terms of funding, does the funding come once you've got the name, or does the name come once you've got the funding?
Well, you have to tread a fine line. That sometimes, I think with shorts it's a lot easier, that you just might think, okay, I'd really love this actor to do this part, and you just have to try and find a convincing way to persuade them, which is, again, a relationship issue, that you might be able to work with a great casting director who has those high-level relationships with the agents to make you sound more, kosher, or some backdoor route to that actor. For feature films, it's entirely different, is that you need to be careful, because financiers like to be involved in that decision-making process, so you can't sort of go to them with a fait accompli and say, this is the film and these are the actors and everyone that's attached to it. They like to be involved in that process, and there's a lot of naivety as well in which names are actually interesting to film financiers. You know, there's still, it's not a snobby thing, but you know, there are television names aren't that interesting to film financiers. And I remember, well, I'm not going to remember that now because that's a private anecdote. One thing that you can do when you're a student, I think, is what you should actually do is learn about the entire chain of the filmmaking process. So don't just think about the production side of it, but try to connect all the dots. So try and work with a sales agent and understand what they do, because they have an entirely different approach. Try and work with a distributor, work with an exhibitor, work with a big production company, a small production company, you know, try and work with a film fund, all of those sort of areas, public film funds, so you can understand how everyone approaches a project. That's hugely important, and that's the one thing you can do when you're still young and studying. You can use the name of somewhere great like this, or if you're at the NFTS, you can use that name as leverage, because people actually are much more willing to take on interns or mentor people nowadays, and it's not as hard as you think. But you have to find the right mentor, of course, and the right place to go. Don't just be sort of starstruck by somebody and then find out they're not really available to help you. You have to know you want a place to do an internship or find a mentor or work experience where it's a two-way street, where they're giving you something back rather than you're just someone that's great at photocopying or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know. So that's the way that you understand about, you know, how to pitch your project, because with films you only get one opportunity to pitch it to somebody, and then it's dirty laundry and they're not interested in hearing about it ever again. So you really have to understand who you're pitching to and what's going to pique their interest and how they approach projects, and that's at the biggest level by understanding everyone in the whole value chain of filmmaking.
Yeah. So are you looking at making a feature film anytime soon, or are you still waiting to get more contacts out there? And
well, I've made feature documentaries, but with fiction features, I've had opportunities arise and they haven't been right, but I now have deals with Film 4 and the BFI and another bigger deal. So I've kind of got a slate of features that I'm working on the next 2-3 years that hopefully I'll start moving next summertime.
Oh, brilliant. And when it comes to finding a script, do you ever read a script and think it's perfect, but you don't maybe have the funding to do it, or how do you sift through scripts and decide what the next film is you're going to make? I'm not that kind of person that just reads spec scripts and reads stuff that comes in. I'm basically work with people at a stage where they might have like a treatment or a step outline or a very rough first draft. So it's a case of understanding if I understand their vision, how they work, I can work with them and I can see the finished film. I tend to work a lot with writer-directors rather than a writer and a director. Yeah. There are also producers that are brilliant at reading what are bad scripts but great ideas and taking those scripts and then turning them into great films. And that's the whole, you have to understand as a producer, what's your speciality, how do you approach talent, how do you approach projects? You know, because there are also some financiers, you know, like a lot of film financiers, they have people that read scripts externally. That's also another opportunity that you could be a script reader for a film financier and write script reports. But they often sometimes will there are some of those financiers that will look at the script report and they'll read, you know, the person doing the report will say, well, this is a bad script for this reason, the tone, the pace, the character development, whatever it is. But the log line might be really catchy. So again, it's like a great idea, but a bad script, and they'll take the log line and think that's a really good idea for a film, but this is not the person to make it, and try and develop it themselves. There are producers that do that as well. So there's lots of different ways of approaching that. You know, you can take if you're looking for books, for example, there's a lot of producers here that will look at books and plays. That's very popular in the UK, and maybe it's a bad play but would make a great film. It's not necessarily Frost Nixon, you know, it could just be something you see at the Bush Theatre or a Fringe Theatre somewhere, which is
an okay play, but you could see the potential for it as a film.
Now, recently crowdfunding has been a massive way for people to fund films, and especially for people who are doing a degree course and don't really have necessarily different ways of funding. Is there other ways in crowdfunding when you're starting out, or you know, how did you start out funding films?
Well, for a mixture of things. I mean, I wasn't really funding films. I was actually trying to maintain a business, which is something a little bit different, which is why I didn't just work in film, but worked in television and on digital platforms as well. So, for example, now, which I think I was saying earlier on, I have an exhibition at the Tate Modern, which is with Google and Film 4. I've done, you know, some 3D commercials working with post-production companies like Frame Store, Double Negative. I've done music videos with people like the Arctic Monkeys, short films that they don't really pay any money particularly, so they just, you know, but the thing that we tried to do is build a sustainable business, so we didn't just want to work in film, but work in all of those different areas and on documentaries, not just fiction projects, and some animation. So I sold animation ideas for children's TV series to like Hits, who make Bob the Builder and all that kind of stuff. And made documentaries for Channel 4 which pay an overhead to you as a company, so you can pay yourself. So I've never really looked for, I've looked to try and have a sustainable business rather than see it as project by project. But if you have a sustainable business, that means you can afford to have an office, have editing equipment, buy cameras, buy sound equipment. So then you can do all these things in-house. You can make your own films. So the point I was trying to make in a very long-winded way is actually with documentaries and some fiction projects, now it's quite exciting because you can just make your own stuff if you start to build some kind of a business and you have equipment and premises, all that kind of, you know, all that kind of stuff. And then you own what you make, and then you sell it and you make the money. It's kind of retrospectively you make the money. So we made a half-hour documentary called On the Run with Abdul about a boy called Abdul who came all the way from Afghanistan to a place called the Jungle, which has now been demolished, a kind of immigration camp near Calais. And it was about how those people are trying to get to the UK. Now we'd done several lower commissions for Channel 4 with this director, and tried to get this commissioned as a first cut, which is a half-hour strand on Channel 4. It's like £50,000 they give you to make a half-hour documentary. They didn't want to make it because they said, this was about 5 years ago, immigration is not interesting anymore, we've dealt with that, you know. And we kind of disagreed, and by then, you know, we really felt that we had a really strong idea and an interesting film, a great filmmaker wanted to make it. We had a camera, we had the sound equipment, we had a little bit of money from doing all the other things that we were doing. So we just made it over the, you know, on and off over the course of about 6 months. So we made our own film through all of those contacts that we had through film school and other networks. We had an editor and a sound designer, people that could do all of it, you know, in a kind of cottage industry way. We made a half-hour on purpose. We made it as a 24-minute film because it's a television half-hour, so you can sell it internationally for TV. We did think Channel 4 might acquire it, they didn't, but instead we had a lot of success at international film festivals. It then got sold to Al Jazeera and to 7 other national broadcasters around Europe, and we made the money in a backwards way. So that's another way of, you know, avoiding crowdfunding and just making your own stuff and then getting it out there yourself, which you can do now in a way that you couldn't have done 5-10 years ago. It just wasn't possible. And that's been a problem in the UK, is that producers and production companies don't own their own work, because by virtue of the financing agreements, quite often you sell what you make and you sell all the rights. You don't own it anymore, so you have to kind of scoop up your fee and your salary from the budget. But, you know, in television, you know, now the rights revert back to you after a few years and you can sell it, which has been a long-standing thing, but you just want to try and own as much as possible. So crowdfunding is brilliant because we made a feature doc that way as well, where we owned it so we could then, you know, sell it retrospectively. But the power of crowdfunding is not just in the money that you can raise through the crowdfunding. So we did this documentary called The Real Social Network about a group of students at University College London who were protesting against the tuition fee rises 3 years ago. Many of them now are quite well known, which we didn't know that at the time, but they're columnists for newspapers and on Question Time and writing books, all this kind of stuff. But the hook of that was they were using new media, digital platforms in really interesting ways, social media, to connect all of the protests around the country and try and be more effective in their protesting. Of course, they weren't that effective because there are now the tuition fees were raised, and but it was an interesting documentary because it was a character-driven piece about a meeting of minds of like very techie, geeky students and very artsy students meeting and making really interesting technology, which is a criticism of Google. Of here, they say that we don't do that here in the UK, that we don't. People do science, they do technology, they do arts, they don't work together. So that was the hook of that documentary. But we raised, because it was a very social action, political documentary, we managed to raise just over $10,000 to get to a first cut. But because of all of the power of the marketing and the publicity of that campaign, we actually raised 6 times that money outside of the crowdfunding campaign through deals with record labels, equity, grants, all kinds of things like that. So I think you have to be quite clever when you're I mean, maybe you already know this because you're all like a really younger crowd and I'm just old and an idiot. But the power of the crowdfunding campaign is actually utilising that network and using the marketing and the publicity, the advertising potential of it to then bring more money into your project. And that's where you can really make a big kind of quick win if you learn how to manage that campaign. It's getting more sophisticated now as well with crowdfunding, that you really have to research how you're going to manage your campaign beforehand and work out what's the hook and how you get people engaged, because everyone's doing crowdfunding now. I mean, we did like one of the first crowdfunding film campaigns in the UK,
right?
And now everyone's doing it. So
do people ever so say a producer or director wants £100,000 to make a movie, do they ever just keep some of the crowdfunding just for their own money, or does it all go into the project of the people that just go, okay, I'll keep that and put that to the film?
I have no idea about that at all. Right. You mean do people
use it to pay themselves?
Well, everyone has a different way of doing it, and that's the exciting thing about it and the scary thing. But actually, the most successful, the campaigns that work are the ones where people need to see the director and the producer selling their film. Then you have to do your pitch. You can't just show a teaser trailer. Yeah. So it goes back to, it's a bit Dragon's Den. It's like, who's standing in front of me and do I trust them and will I give them my money? Yeah. And you can sniff out people that are bullshitters, I suppose, most of the time, I hope. Yeah.
So when you've, is there ever a point when you're producing something where you have certain expectations? So with The Curse, did you think, okay, this should win Cannes, this should get nominated for BAFTA, or do you just kind of make it and just hope for the best?
No, that was very strategic. The aim of that film was for it to be in Cannes, so the whole production timeline worked backwards from the deadlines to submit to Cannes. So I had relationships with some of the programmers there, and we just decided that was the definition of success for us with that film, was that it got selected for Cannes. Right. So we had to make sure that it was completed by April, and that we could send them something by March. And the other issue is that the cinematographer Tina was going to be 6 months pregnant by the end of January, and we had to shoot it before then, otherwise she wouldn't be able to fly. Yeah. So that was another pressure.
Wow. Blimey. Do you have any nightmare stories from producing it? Any shockers that have just made you question whether you're in the right business or not? Never. I think only when you're trying to get a project financed and you can't get people, convinced, or they don't buy into it. But I don't really. You're in the wrong business if you're going to be shocked and depressed. You don't like being shocked and depressed because that's what you do on a daily basis. Those are the emotions you experience. So that's it. And if you don't like it, get off the tracks. That's the way it works, So if you want to make films or you don't, and you have to have a thick skin and believe in your projects. Hence, like the documentary I was telling you about, On the Run with Abdul, Channel 4 didn't want to make it. Okay, we'll make it anyway. Yeah. So not accepting no for an answer and just making your films. The Real Social Network, that almost got commissioned by Channel 4. It didn't. We just made it anyway. Crowdfunding, find another way of making it. Yeah. And have you ever had to pull out of a project that you've got the funding, but then some relationship hasn't worked, or do you know of anyone that's had those kind of issues?
No, I don't at all. It probably does exist somewhere, but I've never experienced it, and the people I know haven't, had that situation happen. What you have to remember about this industry is that it's not just the ideas, particularly if you're new or emerging filmmaker, is that they're investing in you as much as your idea. So I have been in a situation where, with a documentary, we had all the quite substantial financing in place for a feature documentary, and it was all based around a particular contributor who then pulled out for understandable reasons, which I won't go into, and so the film technically collapsed. We went back to the financiers and told them that what had happened, because again, you also can't try and be like a kind of car salesman about it. You have to be quite straightforward with everyone you're dealing with. And they said, okay, that's fine, we understand. Do you have another idea? Because we still want to support you. It wasn't just the film, it was you guys that we were supporting, the director and you, the producer. So we're talking about several £100,000. So people are investing in you as much as your ideas. And part of the trick is really, you have a good idea, but is this person going to be nice to work with, easy to work with? Will they deliver on time? Will they deliver on budget? Will they manage our expectations, to deliver the film that we wanted to see? All that kind of stuff.
Brilliant. What sort of, for people in the audience who are directors of photographies or directors, what traits should they look for in people who are willing to produce their films? So how will they know that they've got a good producer who's at a similar stage in their career?
I just think the main thing you have to do if you're working in like craft and tech area as a head of department is try and understand the bigger picture. That I don't mind any kind of tantrum or difficulty as long as the root cause is that someone makes to make an amazing film. If it's to do with their own ego and they don't feel they're being recognised or status or anything else, then I'm not interested in working with that person. And I think a key failing of perhaps newer heads of department is trying to understand, okay, what are the pressures of the director or the producer, or because there's a whole chain, like how do you have to manage, as a producer, you're the filter between everyone that's making the film and everyone that's financing it, and there's a lot of managing relationships. So the best cinematographers are ones that just have a sense of the bigger picture, that understand the pressures that everyone's under, every other department and the producer and the director, and that's the key thing really. So trying to get a sense that you are, like, filmmaking is immensely collaborative, and the best advice I ever had was always work with people that you admire and you think are better than you, because you can shine in their reflected glory. But it's basically, I look for directors that want to collaborate with all of their heads of department, but similarly I look for heads of department that are looking to collaborate and not just sort of try and work in their own area and think that they're a priority. You know.
Okay, so we're coming into our last 5 minutes now. Does anyone in the audience have any questions? Yep.
Yeah. You were saying that in your business you do quite a wide range of things. Do you think that investing time in various different things rather than specialising in one gives you like gives you a better perspective on each project, because you can take the influences from the various things you've done, so arts and things like that, help you realise the vision with directors and things like that?
It's good to, as a producer, it's good to have a spread of skills, and it's particularly now understand like the wide variety of like creative sectors like games, VFX, animation, like TV, film, digital platforms. But I would say in hindsight, you can be a jack of all trades and master of none. So you have to really hone into what are your strengths and what are your main interests, if that makes sense, rather than sort of spread yourself too thinly, because there's only a finite amount of time that you have as well. To going back to that thing about it's not just the project, it's the person. People want to know once you're working with them that you actually deliver. You give. So if the more you're doing and the more you spread yourself, the more you're not going to deliver good work.
Anyone else? Can't quite see if anyone's putting their hand up or not. Yeah.
Have you got like a set method for approaching investors?
Okay, I think the question was, just for the sound, have you got a set method for approaching investors?
Wait and wait some more and wait till it's the right moment, and never talk to them too early, really. The biggest mistake that I mean, I've made before, and I think everyone makes when you're starting off, is really talking about a project or pitching it when it's not ready to be talked about or pitched. So you really have to make sure that your project is absolutely ready for whoever you're going to pitch it to. And in fact, ready, and then you have something else to show them. So you, as Jeffrey Katzenberg would say, who owns DreamWorks, exceed people's expectations. So they're expecting one thing from the meeting, but you're giving them something more, you know.
Cool. Anyone else before we finish up? Yep, at the back there.
What would you say are the top 3 problems facing people like trying to do individual project, like funded projects? What would you say the top 3 challenges that they would face, and how do you think they could?
Okay, so the question was, what are the top 3 challenges for trying to create a project? Is that right? Independently funded project.
Do you mean getting the money?
Yeah.
It's probably a whole laundry list of challenges about getting the money. I'd say it goes back to, again, approaching people too early, not trying to, when you're taking projects to people, by the way, especially when you're starting off, you just feel the spot. I'm sitting in a spotlight now. You feel the spotlight is on you, and that immediately you start talking about yourself, your projects, and what you're up to. If you're meeting commissioners and funders, you can actually turn it around to them and ask them, what have they funded recently that they liked? What have they seen recently? What are they working on? That's quite an unexpected conversation for them, because a lot of the time people just start talking about themselves. So it also helps you when you're in that meeting, because you might have a project you think you want to pitch to them and then realise it's not right for them, or there's a different way that you have to pitch it to them. So the more that you have that sort of opening conversation with them, the more you can then finesse your pitch to make it, you know, suitable to them and what they're looking for. Or at least people don't have, you know, people get literally hundreds of emails a day in private and public film financiers, and so many people wanting to meet them. So you really have to, as I said, make the meeting worth their while, and it has to be the right moment. And I think if you make a bad impression, the biggest challenge is making the right impression, and 9 times out of 10 people make the wrong impression, and then that's it. They don't really want to meet you again because they don't think that you're professional or know what you're talking about, because there are a lot of people that pretend that they're filmmakers, you know, that aren't substantial. That didn't really answer your question, did it? But I'm not good at those top 3 or top 10 things.
Right, so just to draw it to a close, is there anything you'd like to say, any words of wisdom for any budding producers out there?
Words of wisdom, see, I'm not very good at that either. I would just say, you know, like I said, if you really, if you believe in an idea, it goes back to various questions anyway that we've had this evening, people are more than often going to say no to your idea. So really, you just have to not accept no for an answer and just make stuff yourself. You can. It's easier than ever before to make your own projects, unless you want to shoot your short film on Mars, in which case that's going to be a bit more tricky. But documentary makers tend to have ideas that they want to shoot their first film in Nigeria or somewhere which is not so easy to get to without having money. But basically, you know, don't accept no for an answer, and just prove yourself and make, you know, if you believe in your projects, you're going to make them. And if you take no for an answer, it means that you didn't believe in that project in the first place, I think.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. Yeah.